Hello and welcome to this episode of White Glove Geography. Today we're looking at energy supplies in the UK, the sources of energy and the economic issues of exploiting those energy sources. The key themes today will be about supply, renewables, non-renewables, fossil fuels, the energy mix and also the economic issues. The energy mix in the UK has changed over time. So we're going to take a couple of examples here. So let's take the grey sector there on the left hand side, which is 2012. So that's 26% has been produced by coal. That has decreased by 50% down to 13% in 2017. That's a big drop. And then an even bigger drop towards 2022, where only 3% is going to be produced by coal. So it's a rapidly declining source of energy. Another one to look at here is the increase in renewables. So in 2012, it was 16% that was produced by renewables, so solar, hydroelectric, and particularly onshore and offshore wind farms. In 2017, it was increased to 37%, and again in 2022, another increase to 44% of renewables. And the rest of the components in there have changed over time too. The UK has its own sources of fossil fuels, so here we're going to talk about oil and also coal. On the left hand side we can see a map of the North Sea oil fields. The ones in green are those fields that have recently started production, taking oil out, and the ones in red are those ones that have been explored. They know there's oil there but it's not yet started. However, there's an issue with North Sea oil, and actually the amount of oil coming from the North Sea has declined. It's gone down. And part of the reason for that is there's less demand. The price of oil worldwide has gone down. So there's actually been a risk at times where the cost of taking it out of the ground is greater than the cost of what you actually sell it for. So you can end up actually making a loss. On the right hand side, there's a very clear graph at the bottom right there to show what's happened in the employment in the UK coal industry. There's been a steady decline over time, but there's been particular drop-off points. Say the 1930s, very steep decline in the number of people employed. 1965, another steep decline. And in the 1980s, there were political issues in the 1980s around coal mines, and also it was cheaper to import coal from abroad than it was to produce our own coal. More recently, there's been demands to reduce coal almost totally, and that is due to the efforts to reduce CO2 emissions. It's seen as a dirty fuel, and also some of the other chemicals that are given off when it's burnt as well. Another type of fossil fuel that we have in the UK is access to gas, and one of these sources is in shale rocks under the ground. Whilst this isn't a large source of gas for us in the UK at the moment, there are huge amounts of it under the ground, and one of the way of getting the gas from the shale rock is through a process called hydraulic fracturing or fracking, and that's where water and chemicals and sand are pumped down into these shale rocks. It's forced down under pressure, it opens them up, and then the gas is released and can be collected, stored, and then that's part of the gas supply in the UK. The positives of that, of course, is we can produce our own gas, we can use our own energy sources. That means that we're less reliant on other countries for energy. However, one of the issues is there's thought to be in some places pollution of the drinking water in the aquifers if it's not done properly with the proper safety measures, and also kind of mini earthquakes under the ground that makes the ground a little bit more unstable as well. So there's a lot of controversy about this in the UK at the moment. We have lots of access to renewable sources of energy in the UK. So examples of those typically would be wind farms, solar panels, hydroelectric power, so HEP power. Some of the wind farms are onshore, which is the bottom right photo, so that's on land. Some of the wind farms are offshore, so out at sea, so slightly shallow seas where they can be planted at the seabed. There are positives and negatives for all of these. So in terms of wind farms that are onshore, an economic impact could be about tourism, because typically these will be in places in mountain areas, and these are places where people are going to visit, and there'll be an impact on tourism. The ones that are offshore, so out at sea, they're going to be typically more expensive to install. Solar panels A huge positive of that is actually people can take ownership of their own solar panels and have an impact upon their own CO2 production. But these could be between 5, 10, even £20,000 to install, depending on the size of the roof. And that's sometimes prohibitive and means that people can't install them. HEP power at the top. There's only 2 or 3 HEP power stations in the UK that are producing significant amounts of electricity. They're an important part of the national energy mix. These will typically be powering when there's a surge in demand. It's very difficult to quickly turn on a coal-fired power station. However, these are running at minimum capacity most of the time, and when there's a surge, so at a break in a kind of major TV program, lots of people putting on the kettle, these will suddenly turn on. Just open the stop tap from the head gate at the top of the upper reservoir. The water flows through, turns the turbine, and the water ends up at the lower reservoir. So very, very quickly, within a minute, there's extra electricity in the national grid. Nuclear power is not a renewable form of energy, because once the nuclear fuel rods have been used, that's it, they cannot be used again, so it's not renewable. However, over time it's thought that they emit fewer CO2 gases than other types of energy. There are economic issues to do with this. Clearly, the issue of safety is paramount, so research, safety, building the power plant and the expertise needed for that, there's issues there, and these are hugely expensive. So it's expected to cost about £18 billion for some of the new nuclear power stations. Also, after, hugely expensive to decommission a nuclear power station because there's lots of material on site that's very, very hazardous. They've got to be stored, and it's got to be safely stored over a very, very long period of time, thinking hundreds of years, even thousands of years, until it then becomes safe. So nuclear, there's economic issues connected with this, but it remains a very important part of our energy mix in the UK.